February 10th, 1943. Green River Ordnance Plant, Illinois. The air hangs thick with the scent of hot wax and machinery grease. Along the inspection line, Vesta Stout runs a gloved hand over the seam of another M2 ammunition can. It's heavy, solid, and meant to carry .50 caliber rounds to men like her two sons, both serving with the Navy somewhere in the vast, unforgiving Pacific. But her eyes aren't on the stenciled markings. They're fixed on the flimsy paper tab protruding from beneath the lid's wax seal. Another one looks ready to tear right off. She can picture it with painful clarity. A squad of Marines pinned down on some sweltering, god-forsaken island. The deafening chatter of a Japanese Type 92 machine gun chewing up the sand around them. A soldier grabs a fresh ammo can, yanks the tab, and it rips away, leaving the box hopelessly sealed. A death sentence delivered by a sliver of paper. The thought makes her stomach clench. For weeks, she has watched this flaw pass through her hands, a recurring nightmare packed in steel and wax. She had told her supervisors, pointed out the potentially fatal design. They had listened with polite indifference. The system was the system. But Vesta is not a woman who accepts a flawed system, not when lives are at stake. Tonight, her frustration hardens into resolve. Back in her quiet home, away from the factory's din, she sits at her kitchen table. She takes out a piece of paper and a pen, the weight of her decision settling upon her. She isn't just an inspector anymore. She is a mother on a mission. Her pen begins to move, the words flowing with a desperate certainty. Honorable Mr. Roosevelt. She outlines the problem not with bureaucratic jargon, but with the visceral fear of a parent. She describes the thinness of the paper tape, the uselessness of the pull tab, the precious seconds soldiers would lose under fire, trying to pry open a waxed-over box with a bayonet or a rock. Then she offers the solution. She's experimented with it herself, using a strip of tough fabric-based cloth and a rubberized waterproof adhesive. A tape that's strong enough to create a perfect seal, yet can be ripped by hand in an instant. A deep, steady narration with a calm but commanding tone. Slightly gravelly, mature voice that carries the weight of wartime history. Clear, deliberate pacing, never rushed, allowing tension to build naturally. Subtle emotional restraint, controlled intensity during dramatic moments, quieter and reflective during tragic ones. Cinematic, documentary-style delivery with precise emphasis on key names, dates, and actions. A voice that sounds authoritative, historical, and inevitable. She even includes diagrams, simple but clear, showing how this new tape could be applied for a secure yet easily accessible seal. She folds the letter, slides it into an envelope, and addresses it to the President of the United States. It is a long shot, a message in a bottle, tossed into an ocean of wartime bureaucracy. Weeks later, the message finds its shore. The letter, passed from the White House to the War Production Board, is not dismissed. It's recognized for what it is. A deep, steady narration with a calm but commanding tone. Slightly gravelly, mature voice that carries the weight of wartime history. Clear, deliberate pacing, never rushed, allowing tension to build naturally. Subtle emotional restraint, controlled intensity during dramatic moments, quieter and reflective during tragic ones. Cinematic, documentary-style delivery with precise emphasis on key names, dates, and actions. A voice that sounds authoritative, historical, and inevitable. A brilliantly simple solution to a deadly serious problem. An order is issued. The project is assigned to a company known for its expertise in adhesive tapes, the Industrial Tape Corporation, a division of Johnson & Johnson. In their labs, chemists and engineers get to work, tasked with turning a mother's desperate idea into a tool of war. They use a durable, olive-drab cotton duck cloth for the backing, the same resilient material used in army tents and bags, and bond it to a thick, rubber-based adhesive, coating the whole thing in polyethylene to make it waterproof. It repels moisture like water off a duck's back. The soldiers, when they get their hands on it, will simply call it duct tape. August 23rd, 1943. Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. The sun beats down on the crushed coral runway with a physical weight, baking the air until it shimmers. It has been months since the island was officially secured, but the war here hasn't ended. It has just changed shape. The jungle still rots everything it touches. Boots disintegrate,
rifles rust overnight, and the humidity seeps into every crevice of every machine. A deep, steady narration with a calm but commanding tone. Slightly gravelly, mature voice that carries the weight of wartime history. Clear, deliberate pacing, never rushed, allowing tension to build naturally. Subtle emotional restraint, controlled intensity during dramatic moments, quieter and reflective during tragic ones. Cinematic, documentary-style delivery with precise emphasis on key names, dates, and actions. A voice that sounds authoritative, historical, and inevitable. Sergeant Mike Dutch Kowalski wipes a mixture of sweat and grease from his forehead, staring at the Jeep sitting lopsided in the maintenance bay. It's a Willis MB, a tough little bastard of a vehicle, but the jungle is winning. A sniper's bullet from weeks ago had nicked the radiator hose, and the replacement parts are still sitting in a crate somewhere between here and Pearl Harbor. For now, the Jeep is dead weight. "Hey, Dutch!" a voice cuts through the haze. Corporal Miller jogs over from the supply tent, grinning like he's just found a cold beer. He tosses a roll of something onto the workbench. It lands with a heavy thud. Dutch picks it up. It's a wide roll of tape, olive drab on the outside, sticky as hell on the inside. It smells faintly of rubber and chemicals. "What's this?" "New stuff," Miller says, breathless. "Came in with the ammo crates. They're calling it duct tape, supposed to keep the powder dry." A deep, steady narration with a calm but commanding tone. Slightly gravelly, mature voice that carries the weight of wartime history. Clear, deliberate pacing, never rushed, allowing tension to build naturally. Subtle emotional restraint, controlled intensity during dramatic moments, quieter and reflective during tragic ones. Cinematic, documentary-style delivery with precise emphasis on key names, dates, and actions. A voice that sounds authoritative, historical, and inevitable. Dutch turns the roll over in his hands. It feels substantial, not like the flimsy paper tape that usually tears as soon as you look at it. He peels back a strip. It comes away with a satisfying rip, the adhesive clinging tenaciously to his thumb. He looks at the Jeep's leaking radiator hose, then back at the tape. "Waterproof, huh?" Dutch mutters. He cleans the hose as best he can, wraps the tape tight around the gash, overlapping the layers. The adhesive grips the rubber instantly. He adds a few more wraps for good measure, then signals Miller to crank the engine. The Jeep coughs, sputters, and roars to life. Dutch watches the hose, waiting for the inevitable hiss of steam, the drip of coolant. Nothing. The seal holds. Dutch grins, a rare sight these days. I'll be damned. Word spreads through the camp faster than malaria. The duct tape isn't just for ammo boxes anymore. Within a week, it's everywhere. A tent flap tears in the monsoon rain? Tape it. A deep, steady narration with a calm but commanding tone. Slightly gravelly, mature voice that carries the weight of wartime history. Clear, deliberate pacing, never rushed, allowing tension to build naturally. Subtle emotional restraint, controlled intensity during dramatic moments, quieter and reflective during tragic ones. Cinematic, documentary-style delivery with precise emphasis on key names, dates, and actions. A voice that sounds authoritative, historical, and inevitable. A boot sole starts to flap loose on a patrol, tape it. A rifle stock cracks, tape it. The soldiers discover that this sticky, durable fabric is the universal answer to the entropy of war. It becomes as essential as their M1 Garands, a silent partner in the daily struggle to keep fighting when everything else is falling apart. They start hoarding it, trading cigarettes and chocolate for extra rolls. The 100-mile-an-hour tape legend is born. The belief that you can patch a Jeep together with this stuff and drive it at top speed without it falling apart. But the real test is yet to come. The tape has conquered the mud and the rain. Now it's about to face fire. The clouds are low and gray, pressing down on the jungle like a wet blanket. Major Jack Pappy Reynolds fights the stick of his P-38 Lightning, the twin booms shuddering as anti-aircraft fire blossoms around him in angry black puffs. He's low, too low, strafing a Japanese supply convoy strung out along a muddy track. His wingman, Lieutenant Evans, is tight on his flank, their .50 calibers chewing up trucks and sending geysers of dirt into the air. Suddenly, a violent thump rocks Reynolds' aircraft. The control column jerks in his hands. He glances left. A ragged hole the size of a fist has punched through the leading edge of his wing, perilously close to the main fuel cell. He smells it before he sees it, the sharp chemical stench of high-octane aviation fuel. Vapor is streaming from the wing, atomizing in the slipstream. "I'm hit," Reynolds barks into the radio. "Leaking fuel bad. Evans, on me." "Copy, Pappy. I see it." "You're trailing a white mist." Evans's voice is tense. Reynolds banks hard, pulling away from the flak, his eyes darting to the fuel gauge. The needle is dropping. He's miles from base, over hostile jungle, with a fuel tank that's bleeding his plane dry. He has two choices: bail out now into enemy territory, or try to limp back to the forward airstrip at Taji, a strip of crushed coral barely long enough for a fighter to land. He chooses the latter. He nurses the lightning back, every minute an eternity. The engine sputters as the fuel pressure fluctuates, but he coaxes it down, the wheels kicking up dust as he bounces onto the coral runway. He kills the engines before the props even stop turning, sliding to a halt near the revetments. Ground crews swarm the plane. Chief Mechanic Mac McIntyre is the first one up on the wing, his face grim as he inspects the damage. The fuel cell is compromised, a jagged tear weeping gasoline. There are no spare fuel bladders here. A replacement would have to be flown in from Port Moresby, days away. Reynolds looks at Mac, the question unspoken. Is she grounded? Mac doesn't answer. Instead, he reaches into his tool bag and pulls out a roll of olive drab tape. It's battered, the edges fraying, but the roll is thick. "You're gonna tape it?" Reynolds asks, incredulous. This is a machine that pulls 400 miles per hour, not a busted radiator hose. "It's all we got, Major," Mac grunts. He starts cleaning the area around the tear with a rag soaked in solvent, stripping away the grease and dirt. Then he begins to layer the tape. He applies it with surgical precision, crisscrossing the strips, smoothing them down with his thumb to work out the air bubbles. The adhesive bites into the aluminum skin. He builds up a patch layer by layer until the jagged hole is buried under a thick, rubberized bandage. He steps back, wiping his hands. Let it set for an hour. Then we'll pressure test it. An hour later, they pump fuel back into the tank. Reynolds holds his breath. Mac runs his hand over the patch. It's dry. The seal is holding against the pressure of the fuel, against the vibrations of the engine, against the very laws of probability. "It'll get you back in the air, Major," Mac says, patting the wing. "Just don't go pulling any 9G turns." Reynolds climbs back into the cockpit, shaking his head. He looks out at the patch, a small olive-drab square on the gleaming silver wing. It looks ridiculous. It looks impossible. But as he taxis out, the engines roaring with renewed life, he realizes he's looking at a miracle in a roll. The duct tape isn't just fixing leaks, it's keeping the air war alive. September 2nd, 1945, Tokyo Bay. The war is over. On the deck of the USS Missouri, the ink is drying on the instrument of surrender. The guns are silent. The world takes a breath for the first time in 6 years. Back in the States, the factories are already shifting gears. The tanks are being mothballed, the bombers scrapped for aluminum. But amidst the demobilization, something curious happens. The soldiers coming home don't want to leave everything behind. They bring back stories of battles won and friends lost, but they also bring back a demand for the tools that helped them survive. In hardware stores across America, a new product starts appearing on the shelves. It's no longer just olive drab. It's silver now to match the aluminum ducts of the post-war housing boom. The men who used it to patch fuselages and seal ammo crates now use it to fix leaky pipes in their new suburban homes and patch garden hoses in their backyards. They call it duct tape now, a civilian name for a soldier's tool. But the old-timers, the ones who remember the mud of Guadalcanal and the flak over Europe, still sometimes slip and call it duct tape. Vesta Stout, the mother who just wanted to save her sons, watches from her home in Illinois. She receives no royalties, no parade, but she knows. She knows that somewhere in the Pacific, a Marine is alive because he could open his ammo box in 2 seconds instead of 10. She knows a pilot made it back to base because a mechanic had a roll of sticky cloth in his pocket. Her invention, born from a mother's fear and a nation's ingenuity, has become a permanent part of the American fabric. The 100-mile-an-hour tape didn't just hold machines together. It held an army together. It was the ultimate expression of the GI spirit, adaptable, resilient, and capable of fixing anything with enough grit and the right materials. As the years pass, the tape will go to the moon on Apollo missions, fix fenders on race cars, and become a punchline for comedians. But for the generation that fought the greatest war in history, it will always be the smell of rubber adhesive in a humid jungle, the sound of a tearing strip in the heat of battle, and the simple, sticky assurance that no matter how bad things got, they could patch it up and keep moving forward.